acknowledge the Burmukal clan of the Darug Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which our institute was built. I also pay respect to elders past and present, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And I would like to, on behalf of our director, Professor Ting Han, welcome you to our very first Zoom webinar on ethnomusicology. I thought it would be most fitting to begin the series with Dr. Catherine Ingram, who has spent a large part of her illustrious career working with the Dong ethnic minority group of southern China. To open this session, it is my great honour to welcome Professor Jonathan Stock. Professor Stock is an eminent researcher specialising in the music of East Asia, China and Taiwan. He is Professor of Music and Head of Music at University College, former Head of Music. Professor Stock has a very long and illustrious, impressive track record of publications and is the editor of several journals, including The World of Music, and is co-editor of Ethnomusicology Forums. Over to you, Professor Stock.
Thank you very much indeed. It's an honour to be here and a great pleasure particularly to introduce Catherine today. Catherine and I actually haven't met very often, but we've been watching each other's work, I think, for a while, and I've certainly, for my part, been greatly enjoying and learning from what I've been able to read there. So I was excited actually to be asked, and surprised, but excited to be asked to provide a short introduction for her today. For those of you who don't know her, Catherine is an ethnomusicologist and an ethnographer of contemporary Chinese culture, and culture in the widest sense of the term, the ways that people live in the world today. She's employed as a senior lecturer at the University of Sydney. I hope that's current still, Catherine. I believe it is. Good. Her main focus there is work on Chinese musical culture, and especially the music of the minority groups in China. And her research into the big songs of the Kam people, or the Dong in Chinese, is remarkable in its depth and interdisciplinary inspirations. And genuinely, this is writing which is open to any reader who's interested in Chinese matters or musical matters, in that you will find something in there that turns you a fire, I think it's fair to say. But apart from actually a quite remarkable body of work on that topic and its many dimensions, she has also written on environment and the preservation of cultural heritage, on vocal music education, I believe, on performance practice, on global media and diplomacy. Catherine, do you sleep? How do you do it? It's remarkable. Well done. It's really impressive. I do know that Catherine is an extremely modest person, so you're probably horribly embarrassed by being introduced by somebody who's mentioning your many virtues and activities. But bear with me for just a little bit longer, please. Catherine has held several quite prominent research grants and will be benefiting from that funding and the work that she did as a result of that funding in this talk, I'm certain. I just wanted to mention one or two of them. Among them are periods in the International Institute of Asian Studies at the University of Amsterdam, which is surely Europe's leading centre for work in and across Asian studies. And I think it's fair to say that they don't just take anybody there. You know, they can be very, very, very picky indeed, and they make good choices. She's also worked as a Newton International Fellow at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and the Newton Fellowships are like the teeth of a golden dragon. Literally, they're not perhaps quite as well funded as the teeth of a golden dragon would be, but they're very, very hard to get. They're only given to the most remarkable scholars from around the world, and so that's a real sign. And then there's a whole host of other scholarships and invitations and so on. I won't embarrass her by reading them all out, but it's a very, very impressive background. And in each case, she's produced new work and further work, and so you've never been somebody to rest on your laurels, Catherine. At some point you really should, but we thank you for being so industrious, and we benefit from your work in so many ways. I'm excited by your title in two ways. First, this question about Chinese minority songs and minority singing. Of course, we often say, oh yeah, of course that's Chinese. But then when it comes down to it, what is Chinese? And we often think, oh, Chinese means Mandarin, Chinese means the Han people. And so there are these sort of complexities of, well, is that actually Chinese, or is that kind of Chinese, or what is it? I suspect we're going to learn much more about that in the next hour ahead. And then the bones of songs. This almost piratical title. I'm very excited by this idea of songs that have bones in them. I've heard of songs that are fluid and songs that are that come from ghosts and so on, but songs with bones in them, that's new and exciting to me. So without further ado, Catherine, thank you very much indeed for having come forward with this title, and I look forward to the paper very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Actually, it's a great honour for me to be introduced by you, not least that you're still awake at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or whatever time it is for you. As you might know, your work has really been an inspiration to Chinese music researchers of my generation. In fact, I still sometimes sit with my research students and say, okay, well, how did Jonathan handle this issue? Let's have a look at what he wrote. So I'm very grateful, and I appreciate that very much indeed. Okay, so I want to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the beautiful and unceded lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, as well as any other Indigenous people in attendance today. And I'm very honoured also to be invited to speak in this series and to open what I believe will be a really exciting series hosted by Western Sydney University. So I'd like to start this talk with a story. And this story dates back nearly 18 years to when I first started my doctoral research in ethnomusicology, and when I commenced my fieldwork in Gum minority areas of southwestern China. It's also a story about how I was first introduced to what is known in Gum as Lak Ga, the bones of songs, an important focus of my talk today. As an ethnomusicologist, studying music as an integral part of culture and society, I knew that I would not be able to understand Gum music simply by listening to and analysing recordings, even if I were able to find them. While sounds are important for research in this field, we also acknowledge that the activity of making music has many significant dimensions that cannot be understood only by listening to sounds. I also realised that most of the material I had read about Gum music, almost all written in Chinese, didn't provide enough help either. I needed to hear Gum people's own views on Gum singing, and on singing not just in the past, but also today. How did it feel to sing? What was meaningful about it? What kinds of musical decisions were people making, and why? Very little of what I read was about contemporary singing, or was written by Gum people, or by people who could actually sing or had deep knowledge about Gum songs, or perhaps could even speak the Gum language. So those were the reasons for my need to undertake fieldwork in Gum areas of southwestern China, doing participant observation, a research technique that, as many of you know, is also used in anthropology, sociology, and related fields. For those who are unfamiliar with this approach, it involves observing and learning about the research focus through participating in it. Participant observation is an important method for musical ethnography, a form of understanding and writing about music that relies on description and first-hand experience of people making music. Musical ethnography has been the most important way in which I have researched Gum music. So at the start of my research, almost 18 years ago, I planned to visit Gum areas in southwestern China. For those who are unfamiliar with Gum people, some background might be helpful here. So as has been mentioned, Gum people are known in Chinese as Dongzhu. They're one of the 55 officially recognised minority groups that account for around 8% of China's population. The Gum population is estimated at approximately 3.3 million. And Most people are living in that grey area that you see marked on the map there, though increasingly large numbers of Gum people live in other places, particularly in the eastern seaboard for work or for study. What's quite significant when we think about Gum songs is the Gum language that's used to sing these songs. It's a tonal, monosyllabic language in the Gum Sui branch of the Tai Kadai language family. So that makes it completely different from Mandarin and other Chinese languages, as we refer to them. And importantly, there's no widely used written form of Gum. People do write down the language using a recently devised Romanized orthography, or they use Chinese characters to represent the sounds, but it's not widespread. So these many Gum people still live in villages such as this, especially in the southern Gum areas that retain a far more vigorous musical culture, and where I've spent most of my time. And you can see some of the built environment in Jailao, which is the largest village in Xiang, Sanlong in Chinese, where I've conducted most of my research. If you look at the image on the right of the screen, you'll see a very large delo, a building that's sometimes called a drum tower in English or gulo in Chinese. It's a typical feature of Southern Gum speaking communities, and it's used for various public activities, including singing. These photos show some typical activities that form part of other aspects of daily life in villages of Southern Gum speakers: planting and harvesting rice, preparing a loom to weave cloth, or collecting firewood. In these villages, rice is still the main staple food, rice growing, the major farming activity. And this and many other farming tasks all rely on cooperation between families and friends, especially since the late 80s, when the communes were disbanded and families once again became the main agricultural work units. Since the 1990s, these Gum regions have undergone major socio-economic changes, leading to major socio-cultural changes. These changes have arisen from the mass absence of youth for study or work elsewhere, the spread of Chinese language education, the inception and subsequent popularity of television viewing, and the rapid growth of Gum cultural tourism and state-sponsored promotion of Gum music. Yet despite these major changes, in some regions, singing is still a part of daily life. And since some of these aspects are regionally specific, I'll first introduce some of the music of the Gum region that's been my main field site. So at least 17 different musical genres are sung in my main field site of Xiam, an important singing area in Liping County in Guizhou. And these include songs for greeting and farewelling visitors, entertaining guests during a meal, celebrating the birth of a child, building a new house, weddings, engagements, and major communal village rituals, such as the top two images you see there, the annual ritual for the female deity Sa. So we can't just say that songs are simply associated with these various different important social activities. In fact, many of these activities just cannot take place without singing. Singing is an integral part of the events that constitute these activities. Probably the most well-known Gum song genre from Southern Gum regions is the one that's known in English as Big Song, sometimes Grand Song. It takes its name from the Chinese Da Ge, which is one possible translation of Galao, the name for one category of this type of choral singing. In my research, what I've done is look through the data that I've collected and my experiences of singing Gum Big Song, and identified two separate traditions that have really emerged since the 50s, when these songs first began to be sung on stage. So on the left, you see the image in the Delo. People are singing in the village tradition around the fire, whereas on the right, you can see images from the stage tradition, and I'll speak a bit more about that later on. So my research commenced 5 years before UNESCO recognised Big Song as intangible cultural heritage, and a couple of years before the songs were officially recognised within China as a national level intangible cultural heritage. As I mentioned, I use participant observation as my main research method. And to come back to my story, my introduction to the Bones of Songs, this participant observation began when I first visited various gum regions, trying to get a sense of what singing, in particular big song singing, was occurring at the time I visited, first in 2004. People in Xi'an welcomed me, they agreed to teach me. And so I returned and I ended up spending most of my time in that area. Of course, not just singing, as you can see from the images here. I was very lucky to be instructed by these three gum song experts, Sangha, and they really directed my learning of gum songs, and they began to teach me once I arrived. And they decided to begin teaching me with the most well-known big song from their area. So this song begins, Hai Gai Doka, Bambao Jui, Soi Di Doka, Bambao Sang. Bambao Sang No, Ya Sang Cha, So Yang Dat Di, Niao Mang Diang. So it goes on. You can see a translation there. And they started to teach me in this way by reciting the song lyrics and asking them to repeat them back to them, I should say. At the time, I assumed that they were using this method because I was not a native gum speaker. I needed to learn and understand the words before I could sing them. Actually, at the time I commenced my research, I could barely speak any gum at all, and almost all our communication was in Chinese, mainly Mandarin. But in fact, this is how songs are taught, by the words being chanted and then repeated. Even to revise a song, people chant it, they don't often sing it. Only after quite some time in my research did I learn that these lyrics are the bones of songs, and I started to appreciate how fundamental they are to gum concepts of gum musical heritage. Some years ago, I worked with my three teachers to prepare a co-authored presentation that focuses on the bones of songs. And we created this next short video, which really sums up the key ideas about bones of song from a gum perspective. So I'm going to play that to you now. At the beginning, before we start to discuss the bones of song, you'll hear two musical examples. In the first one, my teachers are chanting the song lyrics in the way that singers would revise them, dokka, revising songs before they want to sing them. And then you'll hear those same lyrics being sung. And I'm sure you'll notice all the many differences in those two forms of rendering the lyrics. And then they go on to talk about, or we all talk about, three issues that are really significant to the bones of song, the song lyrics.
Chỉ chùm miếng tay tàu bản là ngay miếng nhà ngay áo xa cũng chùm đàn tà cái gọi là chẳng mạng bố bạn càng bang tay phải cao chàng sông về quân công nhông xả trong phiền trao xa yang mẹ tay ta xả trong ma thao tay yang mẹ lão vậy say tầm bia lão vậy tay mẹ tay ta cao lão si công xả cây ly xả trong chi lần cha how to nhìn quản cha và chùm miệng tay tao quản lá lấy miệng nhàn nè cậu xa cương chứng đàn ta cây gọi là chẳng mong cô bên cang tăng tay phải cao trang sông quê hương con nhông xả trong biển trao sang giang mẹ tay ta xả trong ma tao tay giang mẹ lao phải xây tăng biển lao phải tay mẹ tay ta cao lao suy con xa tay lấy xả trong chi lần chàng là nghe kia qua ta nghe đời cây ly nhìn bồi đời sang chùa ai
这拉卡我是属于教育人
教
的。
育嘞，จะสอนอย่างเงี้ย
สอนอย่างเงี้ยส่งมันยักเองเนาะมันแค่อย่าบอกเนี่ยอี多干的人说来也拉也该来太不干的，拉最重要就是教育人教对话，就是那样。
拉教的多
教人松根教人这个行外谁呀，外谁那个行就是专门拉雷灯松干拉雷灯，好像就是制造矛盾的意思那样的。 就是不应该为呢，拉嘎就是教育人，为当初
刚จากลากจะจะบอกไม่น่ะมั่งไหลในอย่างจะช่วยจันพี่อ้าวกี่สิไหนไหลลากที่ชิดจะอยู่เป้ามงอย่าปุยเชี่ยแม่ต่อแต่สาแม่ติวแม่ว่านู่นยังบอกชงเหม็นแม่ลึกแม่กลางติวแค่นิ่มแค่ไปแหวกกล้องแม่ลึกโอ้ลึกจ้ะปุยปุยยินแม่ว่า 当年上节，将来画像梦来，将来画门，云游来梦得，按画个没有一来，画线没有一来，就咁就说cái vấn đề điều。
啦，就是拉嘎的画就是不有，我一定的这个水平好不好？
人家乱画乱闹，
不当我们嘎。 มันอยู่ตาซวยแช่ต่างจากกิจแค่ส่งกาลัดรับจะใครแช่ส่งไม่กาลัดสีอยู่ว่าเจ้าสีอยู่ว่าห้องสีอยู่ว่าเนี่ยไปสั่งจะสีอยู่ว่ามันไอ้ว่าไปสั่งมันกาไปสั่งมากก็เป็นการเนี่ยจบเที่ยวกับชินโซมันอยู่แค่ส่งกาลัดกับแช่
开始听话
แค่ไปที่จะสอนจะ
แค่ไปเหมือนจะ
แค่ไปจะมันจะลากแค่ว่ามันจะลากมันจะว่าว่ามึงก็一般讲实际样样讲的啊，噶想的那里意义很深奥。中大比过讲忙那的属于就是绍兴一类的，或是毗邻忙家属于怎样？噶开的那就比较累了，开学会比较会深奥，开就是讲白意思就是呢。 能干碰了意思那样，
比如哪样？
比如就是
要下好像要学呀，开始能干碰要学呀，开始我爸妈就转弯呢。
就是我要刚报价的报
是的。
贵州电视台等的个价文物栏目档的要报那样。 东主大哥的这个行业拉嘎的内容特别深奥，不我相信来，我喜欢你呀，怎么说要学呀，我爱你呀，嘎感觉都要怪恶那的，我就大量那我广中刚咁白的就是那的。
呀，那广州，那为哪里家？
比喻呀，我是比喻的讲，我直接说我爱你呀，我是比喻的讲，怎么个到时们怎么样一来个讲。
比喻要学呀，冇就能保护要学呀。
So these gum ideas might seem to present a kind of paradox of lyrics over melody, but in fact similar notions to this concept of saw, the melody, and lak, the bones of the song, the lyrics, are in fact widespread in China and elsewhere. And a good example of this would be the 12-bar blues. The reasons for a gum focus on lyrics start to make even more sense when we remember the earlier function of the songs and the fact that the gum language has no widely used written form. It relies on oral transmission, such as through song. But in contrast, if we look at big song today, this type of choral song genre, today it's primarily valued both nationally, inside China, and globally for the way its musical elements are structured. So big songs are a form of multi-part singing, meaning that they involve two simultaneous vocal lines, and you might have already picked that up. The first major understanding of these songs by non-gum is this 1958 book. It forms the beginnings of developing a view of gum song as part of China's cultural heritage. It's still an extremely valuable record of gum singing, but we can already see an introduction of ideas that are not part of gum perspectives in the comment that not just lyrics, but also melody was used to determine which songs should be included in the collection, as you can see highlighted in red there. Fan Zuyin, who's the former chairperson of the Minority Music Association in China, and the author of a major monograph on multi-part singing in China, also takes this perspective. By the time of his writing in the late 1990s, multi-part has become the focus of gum big song. This represents a great divergence from gum perspective, wherein the multi-part aspect of songs, big songs, mainly, is really just to enable a lot of people to sing together in a relatively coordinated manner. So that most people sing the weme, the bottom line, and the wese appears occasionally to coordinate the ends of verses. And Fan Zuyin says, I'm reading this quote now, although there are some descriptions of multi-part choral singing in a small number of historical travel writings by scholars and in a small number of old county records, only a handful of these writings include explicit records of multi-part performance forms. Owing to the paucity of these records of folk arts, non-Chinese people, including professional musicians, maintain the view that Chinese music has always been monophonic, and Chinese folk music does not involve polyphonic music. For a long time, this view was common both within and outside China. Finally, in the early 1950s, many types of this artistic form of multi-part folk songs were discovered. Amongst these, the earliest to be collected, arranged and researched was multi-part gum folk song from the southwestern region. So in many respects, this comment from Fan and other comments like it are a reaction to these sorts of statements from European writers and that were apparently widespread at that time. And this book is from 1884 by J.A. Van Alst, and he writes about Chinese music saying, the melodies being always in unison, always in the same key, always equally loud and unchangeable in movement, they cannot fail to appear wearisome and monotonous in comparison with our complicated melodies. It is incontestable that Chinese music compares unfavorably with European music. So this kind of reaction to such European comments by identifying multi-part music then is also reflected in how big song in particular, and perhaps other multi-part song genres as well, are understood as intangible cultural heritage by non-Gum, including non-Gum Chinese. The form of big song that's usually represented in depictions of Gum cultural heritage is this staged form of singing. And as you can see from the images here, it has a particular form. In fact, it has its own distinct repertoire and musical features. For example, the singers often sing faster, higher. They focus on singing songs with melodic interest, and quite a number of the songs, though they might have some connection with the way that songs are sung in the village, they've undergone a process known in Chinese as yishu jiagong, or artistic processing, which has changed them in various different ways. Through being invited to take part in a number of state-sponsored singing competitions together with my Gum friends, and from observing and hearing about other singing competitions, I've come to understand that Gum people often incorporate some of this staged repertoire and many of those musical characteristics into their performances when they go on stage, so that they're more likely to win praise from the competition judges. And this can be seen in the next video I'm going to play you, where I'm singing together with Gum villagers from Xi'an, and we're singing in a 2012 competition in Liping, and the division that we've entered in is called Yuanshen Tai, which Chinese expression that's gained popularity in recent years. It talks about the songs being in the state in which they originated. We might call it authentic, But in fact, as you'll see, my friends take sections of different songs, put them together to form a medley, because that's what's expected in the so-called authentic division of a song competition. And they did win in this case. Actually, adult singers never perform in that kind of way in village singings, for example, at New Year, since doing so would be a great loss of face. It would indicate that the singers lacked ability within what I've termed the village tradition context. So we could say that with staged big song singing, there have been changes to some of the important functions or aspects of the songs. As I've mentioned, often people present a song medley, so this isn't used within village singing. Of some concern is that many younger singers are now most familiar with this kind of performance format. And it's really interesting to observe the different expressions that my gum friends use to talk about this type of singing. So sometimes they'll call them, like, for example, ga shuo xiao, school songs, the stage type songs that you learn at school. Or for one period, they called them ga yuan long, because Wu Yuanlong was the main arranger of these songs in the local performance troupe, also incidentally a gum composer. And last year, in some WeChat exchanges with one of my teachers, and we're speaking gum to each other in recordings, I noticed that she started to use this phrase called ga gai bian. So gai bian is a Chinese word to say changed. Ga is a song. So they're now talking about these stage songs as being changed songs, which is really interesting as well. How these gum singing is presented on stage as part of China's cultural heritage does matter today, because it's a major way in which gum people have a voice and a presence. And in one 2017 article that I co-authored with the gum researcher Wu Jiaping, we've also explained some of the main ways that state-sponsored research into gum singing that commenced in the 50s, as I've mentioned, has also been influential in big song heritage making. As I mentioned, it was through this process that researchers created and named Da Ge, or big song genre. And though it didn't really exist in that way prior to the 50s, it's had a major influence on knowledge and promotion of big song outside gum areas. Okay. So I'd like to play you just a short excerpt of this, this performance so you can see what I'm talking about. You'll hear a very loud sound in the hall of many people talking at the same time as we're singing, which is a really, I think it's a very accurate record of just what it sounded like at the time. And in the captions, I've tried to indicate, or I've indicated when we move to a section of a different song. Remember, this is the authentic, so-called authentic Yuan Shen Tai song category that we entered in. So that's moving on to the third song, and there was one more section as well after that. So these kind of stage performances operate at several dimensions of heritage. So sometimes, like in this case, they provide a space that at least it seems to recognise heritage at the very local level, though in fact not all the songs we're seeing are from the local repertoire. Sometimes it operates to represent a kind of pan-gum heritage, or perhaps even China's heritage. But in the next example that I'm going to play you, the bones of the song are present, in fact, the same song that I've mentioned to you earlier, but they basically seem overlooked, where the stage performance of Gum song comes to symbolize Gum heritage in general, perhaps China's heritage as part of the world's heritage. So for my final example, I want to play you an excerpt of a piece referred to as Li Ping, created by Jean-Francois Maljon, or in Chinese, Shang Malong, a Belgian musician. And it uses the first, second, and fifth lines from the final section of that song that I mentioned to you in my story right at the start, talking about various aspects of Gum philosophy. But as you can see in the translation here, it's really talking about how Gum people should be thinking about death. It's helping people to understand processes of life and death. I don't know how he came to choose this particular song, but he uses them, as you'll hear, in a varying structure over a very fast-paced accompaniment with a string orchestra, kind of jazz, soft rock, acoustic piano, a rock band, and at one point, conga drums. Oh, don't forget electric guitar as well. It seems that this piece first appeared on his album Dong Fusion in 2011, but 3 performances of the piece occurred during 2014 to 2019, all in quite important contexts. So in 2014, the version occurred that I'm going to play for you in, and these are all broadcast contexts, I should add. They are apparently performing the piece live on stage with Gum singers from a region outside Xi'an. So this most famous song from Xi'an is being performed by singers that clearly aren't from the region. We can hear it from their accents. And it's part of a TV show called The World is Listening on the Guizhou television station. The same recording featured in a performance of Big Song in the 2018 Spring Festival Gala, which, as many of you will know, is the most watched television program in the world at Chinese Lunar New Year. I think it's an estimated audience of about 700 million. In 2019, it featured again, and in a concert of 25 items. This concert was broadcast in October 2019 to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, a major national event. So I'm going to now play you the example, and you can observe how Gum heritage is represented in another context again. And in this song, as is typical, interestingly, as is typical in Gum village singing, they sing what's called a danga. It's a kind of song introduction with just vocables to begin. But also interestingly, the danga that they sing is not one that's ever sung in Xi'an, where this song originates. So I'll just play you a few sections.
真的有一种世界的感觉。
So if we turn back now to Gum perspectives on the significance of song, thinking about why this kind of music matters, there's a lot of things that we can now say. As you've seen from some of the song lyrics, singing expresses harmonious social relations, proper social etiquette, as this song says itself. If you don't sing, friends will say you're proud. As my teachers also pointed out, these songs are a crucial form of education. They're record keeping. They maintain culture and language, especially in connection with history, philosophy, social structures, agriculture, environmental knowledge, aesthetic principles, such as the use of metaphor, rhyming patterns. As we've discussed, song enables the occurrence of ritual and major annual events. It also confers cultural and symbolic capital. This is a really interesting aspect that's almost enhanced in these stage performances. It gives a voice to Gum people, not just in the village context, but well beyond. And one new significance that's really emerged in these recent decades are the new opportunities and the increased agency that's resulted from this kind of aspect of the significance of song. I'm not going to generalize about the significance of song to custodians within all of the other 54 minority groups in China, but it was really worth observing how much commonality there was in terms of significance of song. In the discussions between Gum and Madjura singers from Central Australia in our 2017 project, when 6 Gum women and 7 Madjura singers came together in Sydney to discuss the meaning of their songs in terms of issues of home and as well cultural maintenance and the significance of song. So it's not hard to recognise other perspectives besides those of custodians on why songs of Gum and the many other minority groups in China matter. As I speak in this particular context, I think I hardly need to mention the role of heritage recognition and cultural performance in constructing the post-1949 identities of the communities that are designated as China's Xiaoshuminzu, the minority groups. Of course, at the same time, minority singing performances, including within these kinds of state-sponsored activities, provide increased access to agency and voice. As James Belgraves, in describing their use of music for such purposes in other contexts, comments, music represents one of the most prominent avenues for smaller cultures to make themselves heard and recognised on a national and international level. For many Gum people, this is a form of strategic essentialism after Spivak. Often it's used to gain benefits that result from a particular route of access to wider communities. And that in this paralleling what Anthony Seeger describes for Suya or Kaseja people in Mato Grosso, Brazil, where exoticizing Kaseja identity as the community sing for whites in Brazil confirms and permits important access to Kaseja rights and benefits as an Indigenous people. Today, in the Gum context, songs matter too in terms of the tension between this developing pan-Gum musical culture and distinguishing those individual Gum communities, such as Sham, as was mentioned here. And I remember attending one stage performance and hearing people from other villages walk off and say, oh, Sham Nyangjing Dat Ganga. So the song, the shoulder, Sham is really where the shoulder pole broke, and they're referring to a legend of CI bringing songs to Sham and how great Sham singing is and Sham songs, and all this was deduced from the performance from one Sham group. It's clear that so many of the ways that Gum songs matter to Gum communities are not acknowledged or given attention in the broader national, ethnically diverse context. But paradoxically, and I conclude here, the broader context is playing one new and important role in giving the singing of some Gum songs a social function. In vastly altered social context, where economic and socio-cultural developments have shattered many aspects of the generations-old gum systems of musical transmission and performance, the stage performance of these songs show that Chinese minority songs do have value and do matter. An apparently unintended consequence is that gum people, and particularly the gum women that you've seen so often here, have drawn on this to relax their earlier prohibitions on public performances by women of their age group, married and older. In so doing, they are encouraged to learn more, to sing more. On the one hand, it's possible that, at least for gum singers, having some of the most significant elements of gum songs go unrecognised in the broader public arena has prompted greater local efforts and engagement in their own musical traditions, maintaining some kind of local agency over them. Though, as you can see from my last example, it's not a lot when the songs move out of that local arena. But it's hard not to wonder where gum and many other Chinese minority musical cultures would be if there was greater alignment between custodian and non-custodian perspectives on the significance of minority song. And I'll finish there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for that amazing presentation on your research in Southwest China. I always find it fascinating listening to the music of the gum because it reminds me a bit of Bulgarian women singing and what's happening to that sort of tradition as well with, westernization and so forth. And I wonder if Professor Stock would like to open the floor for questions, or if anyone would like to type a question in or speak, please do. Professor Stock had a question about gender and the roles of women as song leaders.
The role of gum women, it's a really interesting recent development that I've observed in gum regions, and I would actually, I argued variously that it's actually been crucial for the maintenance of gum singing. So in earlier times, genres such as big song would have been sung by unmarried women and unmarried or just recently married men. But in the current era, as I mentioned, there's been so many economic and social changes in gum villages, and the vast proportion of these people are living outside their communities. They're often the people that are working in factories or other parts of the eastern seaboard, or perhaps they're studying elsewhere. They're not at home to sing those songs. So when this interest in staged gum performances, the representation of gum heritage really grew in the early 2000s, what it seems to me happened is that officials realized that it's middle-aged women that are at home in their villages that can come and perform the songs at various points during the year. Generally, the married men are not there either, or they're very busy working. So this, at first, very, from what I gather, very gradual movement of married women onto stage led to them relaxing the prohibitions against them performing publicly in the village. And I think that's what's led them on to taking this really greater role within the maintenance of gum musical culture. They're the people that are there. They're the people that are learning and singing. And I can remember instances when I first started research there 18 years ago, where women would, really have to struggle. Like that large performance you saw of 10,000 people singing Gum Big Song, that required us leaving the village for 10 days and spending that entire time in the village centre to rehearse for that performance. And women really had to struggle to have their village tasks covered for that 10-day period during that time. But when it came later on, say maybe later into the 2010s, I found that there were instances where husbands would say to their wives, well, everyone else is going out to sing, aren't you going to? So there really had been a shift in what I observed of women's roles in terms of the maintenance of cultural heritage during that period. And interestingly, a couple of times more recently when I was in those areas during Lunar New Year, where a lot of people do come back from villages, and especially men were wanting to learn. In fact, it was the women who'd learnt the male repertoire as well, teaching those men how to sing the songs that they would previously have been learning in the village context. Yeah, so there's a lot to say, but that's some really, you know, I thought really poignant examples of how those changes are really connected with song. They're connected with the heritageization of song.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for your answer to Professor Stock's question. We have two more questions from the floor. I'm not sure if you can see it in the messages here. One is from Jean Wong, your PhD student, and she's wondering about the lyrics of Big Song, coming from a fixed set of lyrics. And this is followed by a question from Kirsty Gillespie, our old colleague, asking about the presentation of Come Big Song and the value of minority music leading to increased agency. I wonder if there's time for this in this discussion. Would you like to answer both these questions? If people here would like to stay on for a few more minutes, I'd love to know the answer.
Yeah, thanks, Jean and Kirsty, for your questions. Lovely to know you're both out there. So the first question about lyrics, is there a fixed set of lyrics that are passed down through the generations? Is there a practice of ongoing composition? Okay, yeah, this is a great question. So most of the songs that people sing in the majority of the repertoire, at least in the village context, are passed down. We don't know for how long, because as I've shown you all, that 1958 book is the earliest, you know, really clear record of what was being sung. There's some vague statements about singing, but nothing that we can link clearly to what's going on today. And the rhyming patterns are really central in helping to maintain that kind of the integrity of the lyrics, the set of lyrics. So there's often 3 different types of rhymes that are occurring within one song. There'll be end rhymes, there'll be rhymes from one line to the next, and then there'll be rhymes within a line. And they really help to maintain that set of lyrics. There are social occasions when people will create new songs, but usually they're just for a particular purpose. So they might be thanking visitors, or, you know, there's various sort of visiting activities that take place at the beginning of the new Lunar New Year. Another village might come and sing opera for 5 days, 7 days. And when they leave, there's a ritual which involves singing and thanking that group, and the group singing back to thank their hosts and so on. So there's certainly active composition of songs. Some of those songs are made by song experts. Some are made by other people who are good at danga, devising songs. But because they've got a particular purpose, they might mention names and so on, they're not usually, to my knowledge, they very rarely enter the sort of long-standing repertoire, but they do have this really important social function. And as you might guess, interestingly, those new songs are all about, you know, creating new sets of lyrics. They're not about creating a new saw, creating a new melody. No, the lyrics are created and then they're sung to one of the pre-existing saw. So going to Kirsty's question, is there any negative sentiment within Gum communities about the wider performance of Gum song, especially by non-Gum people? Is it ruined or degraded? So most instances where Gum people might see non-Gum singing their song would probably only be a few of the performers in some of the performance troupes, which are, you know, maintained at county and provincial and then prefectural levels, and also, of course, the national level. So some of those singers would be non-Gum, though some of them are Gum in those troupes, and they do sing songs because they speak that language or know enough about that language to sing it. So I don't think that, at least in my experience to date, that that people have seen, you know, a lot of non-Gum sing their songs. So interestingly, even in that example that I played last, it was it was still Gum people singing that song, though it just didn't happen to come from their region. But in terms of, I don't know if you're also asking about the use of those song lyrics in that context, as that Belgian musician did. Yeah, I've been thinking about this lately, and I would say his song, which I was alerted to by younger Gum people, younger Gum friends, has sort of had this rather muted kind of enthusiasm. I mean, I think some younger people thought it was quite interesting, but I think part of it is connected with that idea that songs are a form of cultural capital. And in this case, it wasn't the right people singing the songs. There hadn't been a kind of process of consultation for using this, you know, most well-known song. In fact, it's a song that I know some friends mentioned to me that when the whole process of ICH recognition was occurring in China, they were invited to sing this song for so-called academic experts, or they're invited to sing for academic experts. This song was listed to be sung by the Cultural Bureau troupe. And so the people from Sham said, well, you've stolen our songs, so we're not going to sing. And then they only agreed to sing when their song was given back to them, which is this song that you're hearing in this video, which is really what makes it so interesting. So I think it wasn't that the song was degraded, but people wanted to stand up for their, you know, they sing it best. It's from their region, it belongs to them, and it shows the status of their region. Yeah. At the time that large-scale 10,000 people singing big song performance took place, another song that was popular was by a Miao singer called Ayador, some of you may know of. So Miao people also live in Guizhou. In fact, they live quite close to Gum people. Many Gum people do know Miao people. And in fact, they even mentioned occasionally in song. And the song that she performed, she performed several songs during that period. Don't think they were written by her, probably by Han people, but they used Gum elements in them. And I really felt that they had a different reaction. And I can't tell if it's that they're more familiar with the idiom, the kind of musical idiom that she was using, or, you know, this was too foreign, or with congas and electric guitar, or whether the fact that she was Miao had something to do with it. Yeah, it's something I'm still thinking about.
Thank you for answering that question too, Catherine. I see that we have two more questions, one from Jared Sim, who's a PhD student at ANU, and our colleague in China, perhaps now in Melbourne, Chenri Zhang. I'm conscious of the fact that we've run into 1 o'clock now, or run past 1 o'clock. So perhaps, do you think we can take these questions offline? If I can just give them your email address. Here is Catherine's email address, and also Professor Stock's email address, in case anyone would like to get in touch with Catherine or Jonathan. Really, really appreciate your time, especially Professor Stock for forfeiting his sleep tonight in order to join us from Ireland. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Catherine, for the amazing material you shared with us, and thank you to all the webinar participants. Thank you for your questions too. We hope to see you again soon at the next series, which I will post later on. And if you have any questions for Catherine, please write to her directly, especially, I'm so sorry, Jared and Chenri, if you could please email your questions, because we have run out of time. So thank you all very much again for your wonderful company today.